Eat your heart out, ContraPoints. You're not the only transgender host of Humanity's channel that can get away with big set pieces. Philosophy Tube does that too. Do you want to know what Edinburgh doesn't have? A transport museum. London has a transport museum. Glasgow has a transport museum. Dundee has a transport museum. How the hell does Dundee have a transport museum? It's not like Edinburgh's lacking in transportation heritage, it's just that the stuff that exists today is scattered to the four winds. But Abby, I hear you scream into the void, what about the museum in Glasgow or in Bo'ness? Well, no disrespect to Glasgow, but getting to Glasgow is expensive and I don't have a car. So let's say we were going to set up an Edinburgh Transport Museum. How would we do it? Well, one way is to enter into years and years and years of talks of various heritage organisations who might not want to give up one-of-a-kind examples of trams and trains and carriages and such like. And the other way is Grand Larceny. And I choose Grand Larceny. So come with me on an adventure as we talk about the various parts of Edinburgh's transport heritage and how to steal them back for our Museum of Transport. Okay, so imagine if ScotRail and Bombardier decided to get together and sort of make a copied version of a Japanese Shinkansen to be painted in ScotRail colours and shown off at an exhibition. Not for actual use, just to show off their engineering skills and as a sort of PR exercise. So the exhibition is over and they decide to put it into storage, and then somebody says, hey, I know, let's put it to work on the Glasgow-Edinburgh run. And to literally everyone's surprise, it works exceedingly well. Like, nobody was expecting this to be of any use whatsoever, and somehow it just worked. Now imagine that unit ran for 50 years, and then ran for another 30 years in preservation, and that's basically Caledonia Railways 123. So, a little bit of history about Caledonia Railways 123. Caledonia Railways was built in 1886 by Nielsen & Co. for the Caledonia Railway as a showpiece for both the Caledonia Railway and Nielsen & Co. Now, Caledonia Railways 123 is a single driver engine, which basically means that it has one massive driving wheel right in the centre of the engine. Now, back in the day, that was the Victorian version of a Shinkansen. They were designed like that because single driver engines tended to go a lot faster on dry rails across flat land. Note how I said dry rails and flat land. Scotland does not have dry rails and flat land. It was designed as a showpiece because at the time it was a sort of symbol of elegance and beauty and industrial might both at the same time, and it is a beautiful locomotive. So after it was shown off at the International Exhibition of Industry and Art held in the Meadows in a big massive temporary building, they were just going to just put it aside for more publication work because they didn't think this thing would, work on, actual running duties. Well, guess what? It did. The very same year it was produced, it took part in the Race for the North, which was a competition between the companies of the East Coast Main Line and the West Coast Main Line to see who could get to Edinburgh first. Caledonian Railways 123 pulled the Caledonian Railways section up to Edinburgh, and apparently it got over Petic Summit in decent time. So this locomotive that was designed for flat, dry rails did extremely well for what it was over Petic Summit. After that, it was put on several different duties, including pulling the Royal Train, pulling the Director's Saloons, and inspection trains. That wasn't until 1930. Now, by this time, Caledonian Railways 123 was the last ever single driver engine still running. It was pressed back into service by the LMS for general passenger duties until 1935, when it finally retired. Now bear in mind, in 1886, single driver designs were quickly going out of fashion. By the time it retired, you had the A4 Pacifics. But did its story end just there? No, it went into preservation, and in the 1950s it was restored by British Rail for rail tour duties. That, ladies, gentlemen and aunts, is where we get this footage from one of its rail tours heading up to Callander from Glasgow's Buchanan Street station. It ran until the end of steam in Scotland, at which point it was finally put into preservation as a static exhibit, first in the Glasgow Museum of Transport at Kelvin Grove, and then at its new museum, currently at the Riverside. So, this locomotive has had quite an extraordinary life, and if it was up to us, we'd give it even more extraordinary episodes in its life, because we are going to figure out how to steal it for our own museum. Because after all, it was displayed in Edinburgh first, so surely it should return to its spiritual home. So, how do we steal this locomotive? Well, here's how I'd do it. First, we'd hire an actor. Someone who's very, very, very good at what they do, but has absolutely no recognition. So, no Brad Pitt, no Ryan Reynolds, what's her name again? God. She's always in she's always in Tim Burton things, and she's like really goth, and she has like aristocratic heritage. So we send them off to the museum to talk to the manager, saying that we need to replace the windows in the front of the museum, in the hall where Caledonia Railways 123 is. And we tell them that we can do it all in one night. Now, the manager will be pleased. Being able to do it all in one night would be an absolute boon, because you don't want your museum to be out of commission for weeks and weeks and weeks. Now, of course, we do in fact remove the windows. We need to make space for the locomotive. Next part is to get some standard gauge carpet track. Now, carpet track is just sort of like, track that you lay down temporarily to, display a locomotive or move a locomotive. Sometimes it's used in narrow gauge railways, for exhibition pieces and stuff like that. But we are going to use it to lay a route to the place where Caledonia Railways 123 is, and then we're going to put on that carpet track a shunter. That shunter will pull Caledonia Railways 123 out of the museum. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, hang about, surely people would notice you taking a locomotive out of the Transport Museum at the dead of night on carpet track. Well, that's the beauty of it. We're talking about Glasgow here. Glasgow is a really chaotic city. I mean, every month or so there's some weird sort of news story like, I don't know, man in Partick fights pigeon for bagel or something like that. There's always really, really crazy stuff happening there. So it's crazy enough for people to see and go, oh, that's weird, but I'm just going to keep walking because this is not the weirdest thing I've seen today. But it's crazy enough that when people actually go to call the police and just tell them what's happening right in front of our eyes, the police won't believe them. So we take the shunter and Caledonia Railways 123 up to the end of the carpet track. Then we take the end of the carpet track and you just pass over, pull it up, take it to the front, reattach it, move along, and just keep doing that over and over again until we get over the bridge, over the motorway, and up to the railway. At which point we get Caledonia Railways 123 onto the Helensburgh-Edinburgh line and take it to freedom, back to its spiritual home in Edinburgh. Glasgow City Council won't know what hit them. So many of you probably know that at one point there was a gasworks in Granton, and Granton Gasworks was pretty big, and it had its own internal railway. The internal railway was a 2-foot narrow gauge railway made basically to take loads of coal up to the place where they turned the coal into gas. The whole thing closed in the 1960s, but 2 of the Granton Gasworks locomotives still survive, and they're both in the exact same place. These locomotives are called Ralph and Esme. Yes, they have names. One locomotive is in working condition, the other one not so much. But that doesn't matter because we are going to take it as a static exhibit in our museum. So let me just tell you a couple of things about these 2 Gasworks locomotives. Ralph and Esme are both two 2-foot gauge locomotives built for Granton Gas Works. They were built in 1897 and 1903 respectively. They had very long working lives alongside various other 2-foot gauge locomotives used at the gas works. We even have photos of one of the locomotives when they were in working use at the gasworks. Sadly, their working life had to come to an end and they finally went to retirement in 1966, but both were saved. One went to the Bigger Gasworks Museum and the other one went into a private collection. After a spell at Bigger Gasworks, one of the locomotives was bought by the National Museum of Scotland and eventually found its way with one of its sister engines back to Beamish. Now, if you've never been to Beamish, I highly advise you have a look at it on Google Maps and plan a visit because it is an amazing open-air museum. And both Ralph and Esme should be there waiting for us. Now, I struggled to figure out how we were going to requisition these locomotives, and eventually a bit of inspiration struck me. Look at the shape of these locomotives. What shape are they, roughly? Cuboid. What other thing is a Scottish cuboid related to Scottish history? That's right, the Stone of Destiny. We are going to go down to England, down to County Durham, down to Beamish, and we are going to go in the dead of night to bring back these glorious pieces of Scotland's transport heritage back to its homeland. We are going to take both of them, and then we are going to accidentally break one of them in half. Wait, no, that's okay, so, maybe modelling this plan after the Stone of Destiny heist is a bad idea, because they did actually break the Stone of Destiny in half. They had to, like, put it back together in Glasgow with a sort of brass beam. I don't think that would be a good idea with these locomotives, probably. Now, I actually did try to contact the people who were involved in the Stone of Destiny heist to see if they could give me any insights. They're all dead. I mean, I probably should have expected it considering that the whole thing happened in the 1950s, but yeah, they're all dead. So I guess I'm on my own here. So, plan 2, or plan B, whatever. Here's a thought, right? We're talking about an open-air museum that regularly holds, events like motor rallies and heritage steam days and stuff like that. Now, here's a thought. We could get these locomotives into a horse box, because they're perfectly sized, to fit in a horse box. So what we need to do is get a pair of vintage horse boxes and restore them to their original condition, and then break them down to show off at a motor rally. Then, at the dead of night, we return to our horse boxes, bring the horse boxes over to where these locomotives are stored, and then just slip them into the horse boxes. Just close them up and just drive off with them. Now, you probably think to yourself, hang on a second. When they notice that the horse boxes are gone and the locomotives are gone, they're going to go look for these vintage horse boxes, and they're going to be very easy to spot. Ah, yes, but I'm not finished with my plan. Oh, no. The second part of the plan is very simple. What we do is, we go to a predetermined location with 2 transit vans, okay? And we load both these locomotives into the transit vans and head up to Scotland. The vintage horse boxes would then head down south to Wales, Portsmouth to be exact, to incriminate the Welsh Highland Railway. And that, ladies, gentlemen and ons, is how you steal a couple of narrow gauge locomotives. Now we move on to the roads, and believe it or not, although there's plenty of surviving vintage buses from Lothian Buses, I believe Lothian Buses have their own sort of heritage collection, there are only 2 existing trams from Edinburgh's previous tram systems. And surely, those 2 trams belong in the Edinburgh Transport Museum, back in their spiritual home. Let's start with Edinburgh's only surviving electric tram from its original tramway, Edinburgh Corporation Tramways number 35. Now, Edinburgh Corporation Tramways number 35 is actually the youngest thing on our list. It was built in 1948 and is a double-decker saloon tram. Now, it actually has quite an interesting history. When it was decided to finally get rid of the original trams, there were 3 trams up for preservation. Tram number 35 was the third choice, but the other 2 choices met very interesting fates. The first choice was painted in a sort of last tram of Edinburgh livery, so, for the last ever tram trip in Edinburgh until 2014. The other one was involved in a road crash, so the only tram left was number 35. In 1956, it was placed into a museum in Shrub Hill. That's right, Edinburgh had a transport museum. What happened to that transport museum, you ask? Well, the building started falling apart. So in 1979, the tram had to be moved back into storage whilst the transport museum was basically disestablished. But then it was pressed back into use in Blackpool. In Blackpool, it took part in Blackpool Tramways' 100th anniversary.
There's our man, there's our man, there's our boy!
Then later on it was moved to the Glasgow Garden Festival, where it pretty much ran for the last time in Scotland. In 1989 it was moved down to Derbyshire to Christ's Tramway Museum. It ran once in 1989 just on non-passenger duties to just check everything works, but then it was put back into storage. In 2014 it was given a cosmetic overhaul, but today it now exists in the exhibition hall at Christ's Tramway Museum. Now, here's the thing. I was going to think of some sort of elaborate heist, to get back this tram for the Edinburgh Transport Museum. However, I came up with an even more ingenious plan. Sun Tzu once said, "Supreme victory lies in subduing your opponent without fighting." Well, I have the perfect idea. We go to Christ's Tramway Museum and say, hey, we are going to be celebrating the 10th anniversary of the modern Edinburgh tram network in 2024. Can we have our tram back? We get our tram back and you get promotion for your attraction down here in Derbyshire. How does that sound? And they'll just be like, yeah, sure. It'd be great to have that tram back in Edinburgh to be shown off. Once the festivities are over, we'll just turn around and say, you know what? We're keeping this tram now. And they can sue and they can complain and all that sort of stuff. But you know what we can do? We can hide it somewhere, so nobody can actually find it and take it off us. And eventually they'll give up, and then finally we have Edinburgh tram car number 35 in our possession for our transport museum.
Clang, clang, clang went the Charlie. Ding, 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 ding went the bell.
Now you might notice I said that there are 2 trams from the original tram network. Well, the other one is in a much closer place to Edinburgh, but it's in a dark, terrifying place where even demons fear to tread. It's in the Kingdom of Fife. Edinburgh Street Tramways number 23 is Edinburgh's last ever horse-drawn tram. It was built in 1886 in Edinburgh, making it one of the few items in our collection that actually was built in Edinburgh. It ran from 1886 to 1900 when the tram network was converted from horse haulage to cable haulage, at which point it was bought by a family in St Boswell's who turned it into a summer house, and legends say it became a wee free meeting house. So the Holy Tram stayed in this back garden until 2005, until the couple who actually bought the house went out to investigate this interesting garden shed, and they found out, surprise surprise, it was actually a tram. They set up a trust for its restoration, and the restoration finished in 2012, and it's now on display in the Edinburgh Vintage Bus Museum. I've made a video about it here. Now, this heist isn't going to be easy because, as you probably well know, one does not merely walk into Fife. I mean, you could walk into Fife, you could just take the Forth Road Bridge, but it's probably easier to take the train or a bus or a car. But here's the thing, on the interpretation board in the museum it said that it is in running condition. All they need is a set of horses and a stretch of tram track. Now, sadly, we cannot acquire draft horses strong enough to pull this tram. However, there's something that we can acquire: a permaquip. Now, if you don't know what a permaquip is, a permaquip is a maintenance vehicle used on railways. It's basically just like a small van that runs on rails. What we can do is we can go up to the tram trust and go, hey, we understand that you got a tram that you want to have back in running condition. Well, we don't have horses, but we have a permaquip. What if we like go to Bowness, attach this tram to this permaquip and have it run up and down the railway, you know, get it back into running condition, and it'll probably go, hell yeah, let's do this. So they have this tram running behind a permaquip for the first time in over 100 years. But this is where the plan gets interesting. Late at night, when the horse tram is in storage, we take the permaquip, hook it up to the horse tram, take it up the line to Manuel, turn the permaquip around, reattach it on the other end, get onto the Glasgow line, and make a run for Edinburgh. They won't even know what hit them. We could just say, yeah, we saw some guys with a loader steal it. They went up north. I think if you quickly go, you'll probably catch them. But it'll all be a ruse. It'll be in the Edinburgh Transport Muesum, back in its spiritual home. So that, ladies, gentlemen, and ons, is how you set up the Edinburgh Transport Muesum with Grand Larceny. Let's just hope the police don't get the wrong end of the stick and believe that I am actually setting up a series of heists to set up an Edinburgh Transport Muesum and come and arrest me.